He didn't just borrow money, he borrowed time. For years, Evergrande built cities faster than the world could understand. Tower after tower, rising from dust. Billboards promised a future of glass and gold. Buyers lined up overnight for apartments that didn't yet exist. And at the center of it all stood one man, Hui Kaiyan, a former steel worker who became China's richest developer. He was called a visionary. Banks called him too big to fail. But every skyscraper he built was mortgaged to the next one. Every success was a loan against tomorrow. Evergrande wasn't growing. It was compounding debt disguised as growth. By 2017, Hui's empire was worth over $300 billion, employing more than 200,000 people. Investors believed in the illusion because the illusion worked for a while. Then in 2020, Beijing drew a line, 3 of them. The 3 red lines policy forced developers to prove their balance sheets were real, their cash not just recycled debt. Evergrande failed every test. Overnight, the credit that fueled its rise disappeared. What had looked like unstoppable expansion suddenly revealed itself as over-leveraged collapse. Apartments unfinished. Investors unpaid. Millions of ordinary families left waiting for homes that might never exist. He bet his future on debt and lost everything. Before the towers, there was rust. Hui Kaiyan was born in 1958 in a small village in Henan province, one of the poorest regions in China. His mother died when he was a child, and his father worked in a steel factory. For years, Hui's life was measured in hunger and hard labor. He studied metallurgy, not finance, steel, not skyscrapers. But what he learned early was survival, how to build when you have nothing. After graduating from college in 1982, Hui worked as a technician at a state-owned steel company. He was quiet, ambitious, and observant. The 1,980 seconds were changing China's cities rising, land privatizing, and wealth moving faster than the system could regulate. Hui Kaiyan saw an opening: real estate. In 1996, with borrowed capital and borrowed confidence, he founded Evergrande Group in Guangzhou. The timing couldn't have been better. China's population was moving from countryside to city at a scale the world had never seen. The demand for housing seemed infinite. Evergrande's formula was simple: buy land, borrow money, build fast, sell faster. Cash flowed in from pre-sales before the foundations were even finished. Hui mastered the rhythm, and then he accelerated it. Within a decade, Evergrande became one of China's largest developers. His projects weren't just buildings. They were self-contained cities with schools, shopping centers, and lakes. To investors, Hui looked unstoppable. To banks, he looked essential. By 2009, Evergrande went public in Hong Kong, raising billions. The company expanded beyond real estate into finance, healthcare, tourism, even soccer. Hui bought the Guangzhou Evergrande Football Club and turned it into a national champion. For ordinary Chinese citizens, the brand name Evergrande became a symbol of pride and modern prosperity. But inside the empire, leverage was becoming culture. Each success was financed by the next loan. Hui believed that as long as China kept growing, the debt would never catch him. He once said, "We are serving the country's dream of urbanization." To him, debt was not danger, it was duty. Behind closed doors, his strategy was pure momentum. Secure land with borrowed money, pre-sell apartments, repay the last loan with the next down payment. The model worked spectacularly until it didn't. By 2017, Hui's personal fortune had reached $45 billion, and Evergrande was valued among the top property developers in the world. But beneath the surface, cracks were forming: complex subsidiaries, hidden guarantees, and growing dependency on short-term debt. Still, Hui kept expanding. Electric cars, amusement parks, bottled water, insurance. Evergrande was becoming a conglomerate built on velocity. To the public, Hui remained the self-made billionaire from the countryside, the man who turned poverty into palaces. He once told an interviewer, "The key to success is confidence. If you borrow enough, people believe you can pay it back." It was a philosophy that had built his empire. It would soon become the reason it fell. By 2017, Evergrande had become a kingdom one built not on ideology, but on leverage. Its glass towers stretched across China's biggest cities, from Guangzhou to Chengdu, from Beijing to the edges of smaller towns that barely had paved roads. Each new project promised a version of the modern Chinese dream: security, status, and success. Hui Kaiyan stood at the center of it all. Once the son of a steel worker, he now owned private jets, yachts, and an island retreat. Forbes called him the richest man in China, his net worth soaring beyond $45 billion. To many, he embodied the spirit of the new China: fearless, fast, and endlessly ambitious. Evergrande wasn't just selling homes, it was selling belief. The company built luxury complexes with artificial lakes, European facades, and man-made mountains. Marketing campaigns showed families smiling in marble kitchens, children running through manicured gardens, all financed by deposits collected long before construction finished. The model was breathtakingly simple and dangerously efficient. Use pre-sales to fund current construction. Use current sales to buy new land. Borrow to bridge the gap. Expand faster than oversight could catch up. By 2018, Evergrande owned 1,300 projects across more than 280 cities, employing over 200,000 people and indirectly supporting millions through contractors and suppliers. It was a machine of national importance, too large, too intertwined to fail. The company's reach went far beyond property. Hui Kaiyan diversified into finance, healthcare, tourism, theme parks, bottled water, and even electric vehicles. In 2019, he declared Evergrande would invest over $47 billion to become the world's largest new energy vehicle company. To outsiders, it looked like another bold move. To insiders, it was a desperate search for a new story to tell investors. Evergrande also became a cultural force. When Hui purchased the struggling Guangzhou football club in 2010 and renamed it Guangzhou Evergrande, the team rose from mediocrity to dominate Chinese football, winning multiple national titles and 2 Asian Champions League trophies. Players wore the Evergrande logo across their chests. The club became a symbol of national pride, watched by millions. It was marketing disguised as sports, and it worked brilliantly. Every move Hui made was big, dramatic, and public. When he spoke at corporate meetings, he used the language of destiny. We are not just building homes, we are building the foundation of China's future. Behind the curtain, however, the numbers grew stranger. Evergrande's total debt ballooned to over $300 billion, a figure larger than the GDP of entire countries like Finland or Chile. The company's cash flow depended entirely on constant expansion. As long as new projects launched, the cycle continued. But if sales slowed, everything would stop like a spinning top, losing balance. Still, Hui pressed forward. He surrounded himself with luxury and loyalty. Executives were rewarded lavishly. Banks were courted with promises and parties. Evergrande's annual gatherings resembled royal celebrations. Red carpets, choreographed performances, speeches about national rejuvenation. For ordinary investors, the company seemed invincible. Its bonds yielded high returns, and its stock price reflected the myth of endless growth. To the media, Hui was the property emperor. To the people, he was proof that anything was possible under China's rise. But deep inside, Hui sensed the tremors. The government had begun tightening controls on speculative housing. Economists were warning about systemic risk. Yet, he dismissed them. Evergrande, he said in 2019, is not a problem. We are the solution. The empire glittered from the outside, but inside it was hollow, a perfect illusion of prosperity propped up by debt. Like many before him, Hui believed scale equaled safety and size meant stability. But in finance, gravity always returns. The music was still playing, but the floor was already cracking beneath his feet. And when the rhythm stopped, the silence would echo across the entire nation. In 2020, the music stopped. For more than 2 decades, Evergrande had danced to the rhythm of credit, a rhythm that suddenly went silent when Beijing introduced the 3 red lines. It was meant to control systemic risk in real estate, but for Evergrande, it was a death sentence. The rules were simple: limit debt, raise liquidity, prove solvency. Evergrande failed every metric. For the first time, banks hesitated. Lines of credit shrank. Investors demanded proof, not promises. The company that had always borrowed tomorrow to pay for today was running out of tomorrows. By mid-2021, cracks turned into fractures. Construction stalled on hundreds of sites. Home buyers who had prepaid for apartments began protesting outside local offices. Workers went unpaid. Suppliers stopped delivering materials. What had once been China's pride was now its problem. In September 2021, the company missed key interest payments on its US dollar bonds. Panic rippled through global markets. Traders compared it to Lehman Brothers, a symbol of unchecked expansion and sudden collapse. On the 9th of December 2021, Fitch Ratings officially declared Evergrande in default. The number was staggering: over $300 billion in liabilities. Inside the company's glass headquarters in Shenzhen, morale disintegrated. Employees watched their stock-based bonuses evaporate. Investors flooded chat rooms demanding answers. And Hui Kaiyan, once the hero of China's urban miracle, retreated from public view. In public, he promised to deliver unfinished homes. "We will not fall," he declared in one televised address. But behind the scenes, he was selling assets at fire sale prices, begging local governments for leniency, and pleading with creditors for time. The walls were closing in. In June 2022, a Hong Kong investor filed a winding-up petition, the first of many. Local officials began quietly managing social unrest, ensuring that protests didn't grow into national outrage. By late 2023, Hui was placed under police surveillance, accused of suspected illegal crimes. The empire he built on debt was now being dismantled, one court order at a time. On the 29th of January 2024, a Hong Kong judge finally said what everyone knew: it's time to say enough. The court issued a liquidation order, effectively ending Evergrande's existence as a corporate entity. Its assets would be sold off to repay creditors, though few expected recovery beyond a fraction of what was owed. In March 2024, Chinese regulators fined Evergrande's subsidiary 4.2 billion yuan for falsifying financial reports, and Hui himself was banned for life from the securities market. Investigations revealed that the company had inflated its revenues by nearly 78 billion USD over 2 years. By early 2025, the liquidation expanded to offshore entities. Evergrande's British Virgin Islands unit was dissolved, and court-appointed liquidators began tracing missing funds, including an estimated 6 billion USD in executive payouts and dividends. Meanwhile, the damage spread far beyond Evergrande. Dozens of smaller developers defaulted. Property prices fell. Ordinary Chinese families, who had invested life savings into half-built apartments, found themselves trapped paying mortgages on homes they could not live in. It was more than a financial crisis. It was a crisis of trust. For decades, Chinese citizens had believed that real estate was the safest bet, the foundation of their future. Now, that foundation was cracking. The belief that the government will always step in was fading too. Evergrande had grown so big that everyone assumed it couldn't fail. But in China's new economy, even giants could be sacrificed. When reporters asked economists if Evergrande could recover, one analyst replied, "You don't fix a structure built on sand. You let it fall, and you learn." For Hui Kaiyan, once worth billions, the fall was personal and complete. His private jets were grounded, his assets frozen, his name erased from corporate titles. The empire of concrete had turned to dust, and the man who built it brick by borrowed brick was left standing in silence, surrounded by the ruins of his own ambition. To the Western world, the fall of Evergrande was both familiar and foreign. Familiar because it echoed every debt-fueled boom that came before it. Foreign because it revealed a system built not on markets, but on managed illusion. When Western economists looked at Evergrande, they saw the ghost of Lehman Brothers, a corporate giant that believed scale could outrun risk. A company that convinced the world and itself that leverage was a sign of strength, not fragility. But Evergrande's collapse was not Wall Street's story repeated in Mandarin. It was the story of a nation trying to balance socialism with speculation, control with chaos. In America, debt is a personal gamble. You borrow, you win, or you lose, and the market judges you. Bankruptcy, though painful, is part of the system. In China, debt had been collective. It wasn't just Hui Kaiyan's gamble, it was a promise shared by local governments, banks, and millions of homebuyers. When Evergrande fell, it didn't just shatter balance sheets, it cracked the social contract. Western analysts saw Evergrande as a cautionary tale of moral hazard, the belief that the state will always rescue what's too big to fail. But in Beijing, the message was different. No one is too big to discipline. For the first time, the government let a giant die publicly, signaling a shift from blind growth to controlled deflation. Investors in New York and London watched with disbelief. How could a company with over $300 billion in assets simply disintegrate? Why wasn't there a bailout? Why let millions suffer unfinished homes? The answer was ideological and psychological. In the West, capitalism demands trust in failure. In China, stability demands sacrifice. To American eyes, Evergrande looked like a financial tragedy. To Chinese policymakers, it looked like necessary pain. The contrast ran deeper than numbers. It was about time horizons. Western investors chase quarterly returns, short-term gains, instant liquidity. China's system operates in decades, not quarters where cycles of overexpansion and contraction are tools of control. Evergrande's liquidation wasn't the end of the story. It was a warning shot to every developer who believed the state would always protect excess. From Silicon Valley boardrooms to London trading floors, the lesson resonated. Growth without transparency is a ticking clock. When your balance sheet becomes a maze, time becomes your enemy. Still, Western media couldn't resist the symbolism, a once invincible empire of concrete brought down by its own foundations. The New York Times called it the death of China's housing dream. The Financial Times framed it as a slow-motion implosion of faith in infinite growth. And in think tanks from Washington to Brussels, analysts debated whether Evergrande marked the beginning of a broader global deleveraging or simply a uniquely Chinese reckoning. Meanwhile, Western investors began rethinking their own obsessions. Low interest rates, speculative tech bubbles, meme stocks, the same psychology of overconfidence and denial echoed everywhere. Because debt, in the end, is universal. The illusion that tomorrow will always come, that markets will forgive risk, crosses every border. Evergrande was a mirror held up to the world. It reflected China's ambition, but also America's amnesia, a reminder that debt-driven optimism is never sustainable, no matter the language it speaks. For the West, it wasn't just a Chinese collapse. It was a reflection of itself. When the dust settled, there was silence not just in the empty towers, but in the hearts of millions who once believed in them. The fall of Evergrande was more than a corporate failure. It was a moral reckoning for a generation that equated debt with progress and growth with greatness. In the early years, Hui Kaiyan's story had been a modern fairy tale, a man who rose from poverty to power, who turned steel and concrete into fortune. But when the empire crumbled, that same story became a mirror of excess. It showed what happens when ambition forgets balance, when expansion becomes addiction. For the Chinese people, the collapse left physical scars, half-built homes, abandoned cranes, ghost cities that glimmered under the smog like relics of misplaced faith. For Hui, it left something deeper, the realization that power built on borrowing is borrowed power. In interviews before his disappearance from public life, Hui once said, "That is not danger if you keep moving. But time, unlike money, cannot be refinanced." Across the world, economists dissected the numbers: $300 billion in liabilities, millions of unpaid investors, a shattered housing sector. But beneath the statistics was something quieter: the erosion of trust. Ordinary citizens, who once believed property was safety, now saw it as a gamble. Developers who once bragged about growth now spoke in whispers about survival. Evergrande's ruins became a cautionary monument, not just in China, but in every market where greed hides behind optimism. In the West, investors saw their own reflection in it. The same cycles of mania, leverage, and denial that had destroyed bubbles from Wall Street to Silicon Valley. Freedom, the West learned, isn't about having more, it's about knowing enough. And China, in its own way, learned the same lesson from the opposite side, that control cannot stop consequences once momentum becomes madness. For decades, global capitalism has thrived on speed, faster returns, faster debt, faster dreams. But Evergrande's story slowed everything down. It reminded the world that real value grows quietly, not exponentially, that compounding debt and compounding patience lead to very different kinds of wealth. In the end, no one truly wins a race against time. Evergrande's towers still stand unfinished, ghostly monuments to a system that mistook credit for confidence. And Huikayan, he remains a symbol of both possibility and peril, proof that a single man's ambition can lift a nation's spirit and just as easily fracture it. For all its tragedy, the story of Evergrande isn't just about failure, it's about awakening. The awakening that every empire, corporate, political, or personal faces when it confuses scale with strength. Somewhere in a quiet office, a young analyst studying Evergrande's fall might learn the lesson that Hui never did. Wealth is not measured by what you can build. It's measured by what can stand without you. He didn't buy freedom, he borrowed it. And when the debt came due, it took everything.